Hiyo! Name's Geela, but I also go by Jella. Welcome back. And yo, I finally found my mic stand yesterday on the last day of August, right before I went to bed. It was quite an exciting moment actually. So, I'm actually re-recording this audio, meaning I'm going to have to post this video on the 2nd instead of September 1st. Still, hopefully this long script will sound more even now. Anyway, as I stated, I wanted to do something true crime related since I stumbled upon this when I was researching stuff on Not Alice, and you guys can probably guess why, with Wonderland being in the name. The Wonderland Murders, said to be one of the bloodiest and gruesomest crime scenes that the LAPD detectives had seen by that time, and it's still considered to be unsolved to this day. So, trigger warnings of mature content regarding murder and drug use, so please click off if you need to take care of your own mental health. Now, this event has about 10 key players, ranging from the targets to those who died, to those who were injured, to those who are accused. Their names, Ron and Susan Lanius, Billy DeVille, David Lind, Tracy McCourt, Joy Miller, Barbara Richardson, John Holmes, Gregory Diles, and Eddie Nash. I know, that's a lot of names to remember, but as I recount these events, hopefully you'll be able to become more familiar with each name. Perhaps by the end of this, you might have come to your own conclusions regarding this case, so you can comment your thoughts once we're all done. I'd love to hear your opinions and your thoughts and the emotions that you went through, because goodness gracious, this was a lot for me too. Now, these murders happened extremely early in the morning, speculated to be around the witching hour of July 1st, 1981, 3 a.m. on 8763 Wonderland Avenue in the Laurel Canyon region of Los Angeles. This location was where the Wonderland gang frequented and even lived in as a home base, used for drug dealings, particularly cocaine. Thus, with this avenue and the gang name, the murders got its title of the Wonderland Murders, though it's also known by its lesser-used title of the Laurel Canyon Murders, due to, the location. Maybe I'm a little ahead of myself. Let's put down a better foundation and some more background information. Basically, the Wonderland gang was one of the most influential and feared cocaine traffickers in LA during the late 1970s and early 1980s, despite their relatively small size. Wonderland's leader, Ron Lanius, was stated to be an extremely cold and collected person who wasn't afraid of violence. He had previously been in the US Air Force during the Vietnam War before being dishonorably discharged due to, as you could guess, smuggling heroin from Vietnam. But in the caskets and the corpses of American soldiers in early 1972. I know, disrespectful for the fallen soldiers and utterly disgusting behavior if you ask me. By that time, he was married to Susan Murphy, who was never really a true member of the Wonderland gang, but more of an associate who was, sadly, also addicted to drugs. Then, in 1974, Ron was arrested and charged for murdering Gary Moore, a police drug informant. But this case was dropped because of a key witness against Ron, Carl Smith, died in July of that year to a police shootout unrelated to the case. With no hard evidence nor any witnesses, they couldn't convict Ron for murder. Still, police were able to convict Ron for smuggling heroin, cocaine, and other drugs from Mexico, sentenced 8 years to prison. But he only served 3 of those 8 years before he was released. Here, his pattern of behavior continued, creating the notorious Wonderland gang for drug trafficking, as well as being the suspected perpetrator for 27 open homicide cases by 1981. But, unfortunately, he was never convicted on any of these cases. I know, this leader sounds like he means serious business, and I wouldn't want to mess with him. Quite domineering, if you ask me. Now, Ron's second in command, William Billy DeVille. He was a bit more morally conscious than his buddy Ron, but was trapped in his addiction to drugs that made him unable to escape the gang. He had been arrested 13 times also for this addiction, and I'm pretty sure back then, addiction recovery opportunities were not the same as they were today. But despite having periods of self-loathing and desire to get clean, he kept with the Wonderland gang. After all, it's extremely difficult to get clean when you have such easy access to drugs. Of course, this isn't an excuse for any of his unsavory actions that he did as a gang member. Still, addiction is no joke, guys, so please take care of yourselves. Similarly, Billy's girlfriend, Joy Miller, was an actual member of the Wonderland gang, as well as addicted to opioids. She was the one who held the lease for the home base at Wonderland, gaining this 3-story townhouse in 1978. Fourth member was David Lind, who was also addicted to heroin. Unlike Billy, he wasn't as morally conscious. Throughout his years, he had been jailed multiple times for armed robbery, forgery assault, and attempted rape. He was also a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. If you're like me, you probably didn't know what in the world the Aryan Brotherhood was, or is. Quick summary, it's a neo-Nazi prison group and organized crime syndicate. I know, I was startled when I looked it up too. So, David really doesn't have the best resume as of right now. The reason why David entered the Wonderland gang also was because he had befriended Ron while in prison together. Though, similar to Billy, David's girlfriend Barbara Richardson became an associate, but not a member of the Wonderland gang. However, what I found super surprising was that both David and Barbara were police informants for the Sacramento region before moving to LA. Lastly, Tracy McCourt. Honestly, I couldn't find much about this guy outside of the fact that he played the getaway driver at times, but he most likely also participated in any drug trafficking and armed robberies conducted by the gang. So, there's that. I say this because 2 days before the Wonderland murders, the Wonderland gang conducted a robbery that triggered the events of July 1st, 1981. On June 29th, 1981, at 8 a.m., a few members of the Wonderland gang, comprised of Ron, Billy, David, Tracy, as well as an associate adult film star John Holmes, robbed the mansion home of Adel Nasrallah. Maybe pronounced his name wrong, but Adele was mostly known as Eddie Nash, another extremely powerful individual in organized crime, as well as an owner for nightclubs and restaurants in the area. John Holmes was an insider and was very close to Nash, having been referred to as a brother to him. However, from what I can only assume was from greed, Holmes betrayed Nash by visiting Nash that Monday morning to party before leaving the patio door unlocked, having schemed with the Wonderland gang to rob the mansion. Actually, there's a possibility that Holmes completely forgot to unlock the patio door the first time, so there's a possibility that he had to go back again to visit the mansion in order to make sure that the door was unlocked. But also, when Holmes went to Wonderland, there's also a possibility that the gang was just completely drugged up on heroin, so Holmes had to wait it out until they sobered up. By that time, Holmes went back to the Nash mansion because he wanted to check whether or not that patio door was still unlocked. Sounds like a complete mess to me. But, as I said, not fully sure if this actually happened, but if it did, God, that's disappointing. Like, come on, I thought you guys were like professional criminals. Anyway, Holmes gave the Wonderland gang the location in the house where they could find buttloads of cash and drugs, aka where the safe was. So Ron, Billy, and David went into the mansion, guns in towed, as Tracy stayed in the getaway car, which they had stolen prior. Smartly, the gang used something called liquid band-aid that prevents fingerprints from being left behind. Anyway, they successfully robbed Nash, forcing him to open his safe after David accidentally shot and injured Nash's bodyguard, Gregory Diles. They got about $1.2 million, about $3.4 million today, worth of drugs, cash, guns, and jewelry. Of course, after such a success, the gang went back to Wonderland to party. Travis, however, wasn't feeling it and chose to leave the Wonderland house for the time being, choosing to stay with friends elsewhere. Susan, on the other hand, was not at the Wonderland house during that time, but she did come back the next morning, picked up by her husband Ron. David, though, later left that day to enjoy some of his spoils, as well as conduct some more drug deals before spending the night at a motel with a male prostitute. Finally, now we have set up for the events of July 1st. Here, neighbors said that they heard screams during the Devil's Hour, around 3 a.m., but no one called the police. 13 hours later, nearing 4 p.m., 2 associates of the Wonderland gang entered the home and found the bodies of Ron, Joy, Billy, Barbara, and Susan. Yes, you might have realized it or might have not, but the Wonderland gang members were not the suspected perpetrators of the Wonderland murders, but instead they were the targets. Ron, Joy, Billy, and Barbara were brutally murdered that night, while Susan was barely holding on to life by the time that the paramedics came at 3:55 p.m. Over 12 hours of agonizing pain from a crushed skull and other injuries. The police arrived shortly after, videotaping and investigating the crime scene for the rest of the night. Barbara's body was bloodied on the living room floor, next to the couch that she was suspected to have been sleeping on that night. Joy's body was on her bed, Billy's body was on the floor next to said bed, leaned up against the TV stand, and Ron's body next to his own bed on the floor with the barely surviving Susan. The corpses were then removed the following morning, and based off of the scene as well as the damages on the bodies, each had been brutally beaten to death with a hammer, which had been found at the crime scene, and possible steel pipes. With 4 dead, the Wonderland murders also got the name of the 4-on-the-floor murders to allude to where most of the bodies had been found. I know, that was some really heavy and gruesome stuff, so if you guys need a break, you can pause the video, take a breather if you need to, perhaps get some water. That's perfectly fine. This video will still be here when you're ready to continue. Now, you might have been like me where I said, it had to be Nash, seeking revenge. Well, the police did raid Nash's house on July 10th, just 9 days after the incident. This was because David went to the police to give them information regarding the case. Yes, David, one of the original targets, who managed to survive simply because he was at a motel room elsewhere. Similar to how Tracy survived by leaving Wonderland that day in order to stay with friends. And saying that just one decision to not stay at Wonderland that night saved their lives. Anyway, the raid ended with Nash and Diles being arrested since Diles had a shootout with the police and the house was full of drugs, but they did end up getting out on bail. The next day, the police took Holmes into protective custody for a few days, trying to get more information on Nash. Sadly, Holmes didn't implicate Nash or Diles for the Wonderland murders. Once released, Holmes thought it was instead a good idea to run with a woman named Dawn Schiller, who is believed to be one of his many girlfriends. Yes, girlfriends, despite having a wife. However, revealed years later, Dawn stated that she was actually being abused and trafficked by Holmes after being groomed by him when she was a teenager, manipulated also by drugs and alcohol. I know, Holmes is sounding like a horrible guy, and definitely isn't sounding innocent by fleeing to the state of Florida. In August 21st of the same year, police arrested David to keep him alive and well to be a witness. And sometime in September, Susan was released from the hospital. She had survived the July 1st incident, but not without lasting brain damage and memory loss. Still, she was used for testimony and as a witness. On December 4th, Holmes was arrested in Florida, giving Dawn the much-needed opportunity to finally escape him while Holmes was being brought back to California. Nash and Diles, well, they were going through more arrests, but that was for drug charges. Diles in particular had saliva, blood, and hair collected on December 8th in order to see if they matched with any evidence found at the crime scene, but it yielded no real result. So the police had to set their focus on Holmes. Early February of 1982, Holmes had a preliminary trial for murder, Susan, David, Tracy, and others providing witness against his character. The judge considered it to be a case for trial, set it for June 4th of the same year. Once June arrives, the jurors are then shown the gruesome footage taken by the police of Wonderland, but Holmes' defense lawyers were doing a bang-up job, convincing the jurors that Holmes had no choice. It was revealed that Nash's goons had kidnapped Holmes the day before the murders, interrogating and allegedly threatening Holmes and his family, meaning the defense was that Holmes helped the true killers under duress. Back on the trial, the jury finally deliberated on June 23rd before ultimately stating that Holmes was not guilty of murder/attempted murder on June 25th. The only reason Holmes got 110 days of jail time in general was for contempt of court, as in Holmes did not cooperate or answer any of the grand jury's questions. Once he was released, he went back into the adult film industry, where he was honored and recognized as a king in said industry by 1985. Holmes even left his autograph in prints in the cement outside of Pussycat Theater in LA. Yes, it's still there today. Though Holmes didn't survive much longer, dying of AIDS complications on March 13, 1988. His wife Sharon then came clean, alleging that Holmes had told her on the day of the murders that he had helped 3 individuals enter Wonderland, watching the scene reluctantly and thus getting covered in blood. Whether or not this is true has been debated because Holmes was considered to be a notorious liar as well as untrustworthy. Oh my goodness, can you imagine having a husband like Holmes and living through these kinds of situations and being told that? No. And it still sort of just leaves a bad taste in my mouth that like Holmes was able to be given such recognition in his field. I don't know. Continuing. With Holmes dead, the attention was now shifted onto Nash and Diles. Over these years, both had been in and out of jail on various drug charges, but nothing concretely related to the Wonderland murders. Finally, on September 7th of 1988, a few months after Holmes' death, both Nash and Diles were charged for the Wonderland murders. Tracy is put into protective custody in order to testify against the two. Not surprisingly, Nash and Diles plead innocent by September 23rd. Still, they did stay in jail until their trials in May of 1990. Crazy thing is that in Nash's trial, it ended in a hung jury of 11-1. I know, I'm over here like, what? No way, like, how could you not have like 12 just like across the board understanding that like he had something to do with the Wonderland murders? But apparently in 2000, Nash admitted to bribing a juror with $5,000. Now it finally starts to make a little bit more sense. So, because of that hung jury, Nash had to be tried again, this time with Diles in a dual jury trial. And guess what? It ended in a mistrial, and by January 18th, 1991, both were acquitted. What? Yes, I guess I get it. They didn't have enough hard evidence on the two, so without the hard evidence, they really couldn't convict. And until the very end, both claimed their innocence regarding the murders. Diles then dies on January 16th, 1997 to liver problems, and Nash, alive, was actually charged in 2000 for, once again, drug trafficking and money laundering. However, conspiring to carry out the Wonderland murders was also included. However, Nash was able to get out on bail, of course, but he got arrested again because he violated said bail. So his arrest was on January 7th, 2001, and on September 10th, Nash takes a plea deal to serve 37 months. Months! That's like 3 years. But he still states that he did not conspire to murder at Wonderland. At most, Nash stated that he was only connected to those who retrieved back the stolen property in Wonderland, not aiming for murder. Whether or not people believe that is up to them. And that's it. I know, it feels so not satisfying at all. Like, even police have stated that they know Nash, Diles, and Holmes were involved with the murders, but they just could never get a charge to stick. So, this means that this case is ultimately still unsolved despite there seeming to be an answer. However, of course, innocent until proven guilty, and there was just not enough hard evidence to convict, and lawyers ultimately did a really good job in defending these three. Anyway, that's the end of this video. I hope you found it as a roller coaster of a ride like I did, or maybe you didn't, but still, comment your thoughts and feelings. I would love to read them. There's also a few links in the descriptions because there were just some details that I missed or just didn't include for time's sake. I do plan on more true crime videos in the future, but I don't really have a set schedule on that yet. Still, I hope that you choose to subscribe and stick around. Regarding the drawing that I did here, I just chose to do a very simple sort of focus on perspective and like buildings because I need practice on that. And I just used the Wonderland Murders location. And tell me if you like it with like the slight color or just plain black and white, because I still can't really choose. Anyways, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take a break if you need to, go watch some nice cat videos to make yourselves feel better. So, annyeong, adios, bye!